Hey, WCA, Mike Amore, 12 p.m., 2 p.m. update. Week 2, fall 2017. Great class yesterday. Really enjoyed myself. All 3 classes did very, very well. We are actually looking at a position that was played between Chris with white and Emiliano with black. Black is in a little trouble here because if you do the math, you'll see that white is up a whole queen, and she's hanging out here on b5. Emiliano with black, I've only known him for 2 weeks now, but I can already tell that he is one of the players that will not give up in a game. And Chris here clearly has a winning position with an extra queen, but I showed him a little trick here that may not be the best move in the position, but it is a position that I know is completely winning for white that gives black no chance of a comeback. Now, here's what I mean by that. If we did the math here, I think white has 29 points. You can do it yourself and see if I'm wrong. And black has 20. So that's a 9-point difference. And that's the queen, right? Okay. If you leave everything on the board for black, the 2 rooks and the knight, it's very, very unlikely that black can still win this, but there is always the chance of white messing up somewhere. Here it turns out, after pawn a6 attacking the queen, white has a clever trick here, and on the surface it looks like a bad move, and that involves taking the rook up here. Now, bad move, right? You're giving up a queen for a rook. But let's go a little bit deeper. Black is in check, and they only have 1 move. They have to take the queen. Okay, can you spot the idea of the queen sacrifice? Hopefully you saw this, that the rook on e1 is now pinning the knight to the rook on e8. So whenever you see a pinned piece, what are you taught to do? Attack it again. And we play the move pawn f4. So we're actually going to win that black knight up there on e5. So I played this out against a computer. So let's go back to this position. And white is winning, right, after this move. But I want to show you how. So I set the computer to play at a level that is not quite as strong as it normally is, but it's much stronger than any one that we would face in a real tournament. So what I'm going to do is take you through what I did to win the position as if I were playing a real person. I'll share my thoughts with you, but most importantly for the whole group, make sure you're able to do this stuff yourself. What's the best way to do that? Go to chesskid.com, get on those workouts, and practice the winning positions. Okay, here's one that could have happened in a real game. So, white to play. What do? Well, we attack the pin piece. The computer protected the knight. I took it. They took back. And the first thing I say to myself whenever I have a completely winning position is I always say, what can the other side do to me? You know, like if my king were here for some reason and the black rook was threatening to come to my back rank and checkmate me, then I might make an escape square for my king. Is that a problem here? No, the king, well, let's take that back. The king here on g1 is already set to come out. He's not afraid of anything. The only other way white can lose this game is if they're very careless with their 2 rooks and bishops and just lose them for nothing. Like, put the bishop here and let them take it. That's not going to happen at the WCA. So the only other way that black wins is by turning one of their pawns into a queen. Now, black in this position is the only one with one of these. Do you know why I highlighted that pawn? That's correct. It's a passed pawn. There are no white pawns that can stop it. But in this particular position, that is not a problem for us. Our king can stop it. The rook can stop it. You can swing the bishop down. So this pawn is really going nowhere. So step 1, make sure the opponent can't do anything to you. Did we do that? Yes. What are the other things that we do? Well, to turn this into a win, we first have to get our pieces on good squares. We did our homework. Black cannot do anything to us. So now it's time to improve each of our pieces until something happens. So one thing we're going to do is improve every single one of these big pieces, the bishop, the two rooks, and the king. Remember, if this king is here in this position, Black can't do anything to you. Your king is perfectly safe. As a matter of fact, this is an annoying king to Black because it's attacking squares in their territory. This is not a middle game. There's no way Black's going to mate you. So we're going to improve the king, the rooks, and the bishop. All right. Another idea is to break into Black's position at some point. And how do we do that? By trading pawns. Okay, let's go through the game. So I brought the king up, activating the king. So did Black. And now I don't see a clear win yet, but I know that if I just improve my pieces, something good's going to happen to me. So out of the 4 pieces, I just activated my king. This rook looks pretty good here. This bishop controlling a lot of dark squares. Hey, rook, what's up here in the corner? So that was the first piece that I looked at. I started to look for tactics. I didn't see anything, and then I just improved the rook in the corner. How? I put it on a half-open file. Black made this pawn chain. And remember, the computer, I'm not giving it a whole lot of time to think, so these moves aren't perfect by Black, but they're really good enough for our purpose because in tournaments, kids rated 800, 900, 1,000 will probably not play as well as Black. Okay, now the move pawn c4. And these pawns here in the middle, see this guy here on c4? It's kind of protecting our center pawn up here in the middle, and it's slowing down these pawns here. So what I'm doing is I'm making a little team effort, 2 pawns on light squares and a bishop covering the dark squares. Do you see what that formation is doing to this side of the board? It's kind of closing it down. Black doesn't really have a chance on that side. The pawn in the center, not going anywhere. I hope this makes sense. So the rook comes to d8. So who knows? Maybe they're going to try to push this pawn someday and weaken this. I'm really not sure what they can do. So up comes the king, trying to come to that magic square that I showed you before. And Black said to me, no way. Okay, once this pawn moves from f6 to f5, the e pawn loses a little bit of its protection. Let's go back. See this position? The e pawn is very solid. So by moving my king up, I'm trying to get Black to weaken this pawn. And they did. They played pawn f5 to keep me out. So I just took a step back, and you can see that my rook is targeting the e pawn. You guys got that? So if Black wants to give me the pawn, I'm going to take it. And they said no by pushing it up. Now, when they pushed it up, they created a pawn chain on light squares. If you go back to this position, the pawn chain is on dark squares. So now that it's on light squares way up here, I'm sorry, let's drop our king back. Once they play e4, now I'm like, you know what? Time to break in. And I attack the structure. If the pawn takes, then I simply take this pawn with the rook. The rook is dominating the only open file. His friend here is soon to join. This is really good for white. So the machine does not like my idea. So they protect it with g6. Let's back it up so you can see it again. It's the machine's turn. g6. Okay, my turn. I don't mind making a trade here because by making the trade, do you see all those dark squares there? That's number one. All the pawns on this side of the board are on light squares. That means there's a ton of dark squared weaknesses. Number two, did anybody happen to notice what happened to the G file? It opened up. So that's why I went for this trade. I'm not randomly trading pawns. I'm doing it to weaken the dark squares and to open the G file. Okay, this side of the board, taken care of. Center of the board, taken care of. Now I'm going to think about coming in on this side. So what was the first move I played? Looks kind of funny. I retreated my bishop because I wanted to dominate on all those dark squares. Number one. Number two, I'm planning to swing it in and come back to attacking this side of the board. Kind of a sneaky move. The computer took the only open file, and then I just put the bishop on f4, attacking this weak pawn. Do you see what happens if the pawn pushes? The rook on b1 could take this pawn. You could take this pawn. You could push past. Black really can't do anything on this side of the board. So black said, you're not taking my pawn for free. No problem. Up comes the king. What's the purpose? You may want to put the king here and here someday. Don't laugh. That king is in no danger here. He's actually attacking stuff. Number two, these two pawns here for white are completely stuck. King e7, and now what to do? Do you see something free to take? If not, improve a piece. What would you do? Excellent. Beautiful. Great move. The rook wants to come in to the 7th rank. That would be annoying. So black says no. And now a move that I wasn't going to play this because I was afraid that I'd confuse some kids, and I really shouldn't, but I'm going to show you the move anyway. I played a4, and all that move does is completely lock down this side of the board, and there's not much that black can do to stop it, so they just started pushing pawns. In comes a rook, attacks the pawn moved to h4. How do you improve your position? That's right. Now that this side of the board is completely locked up, hello, rook. Hello, rook. Slide it into the game. Double up. Rook came over to f8, offering me a free pawn. Not really interested because I can almost see a checkmate here. Almost. But I know it's pretty close. Gave a check. King backed up to e7. And now this anchor move. I throw the rook over to c6 to attack the pawn, and I use the word anchor because I know that rook is protected by this pawn here on d5. So I'm just attacking the pawn. The rook came over to protect it. Now, of course, my friends, I can just take that pawn because I'm up already material and I'm attacking it twice, but I'm not interested. I want to leave the black rook up here on c8, and I gave a check with our second rook. The king went to f8. And I really like this rook where it is on g7 because it's got the king cut off, right? You see how he's cut off? So if I retreat, the king might come out somewhere. So I don't want to move it at all. So what did I do? I protected it. How? You can use this bishop. You can do it from here on e5 or from h6. Which one would you choose and why? I chose h6. Why? Because it protects my rook, number one. Number two, it's setting up for a sneaky, sneaky discovered check. And if I get to play one of those in this position, not going to be good for black. So the king sidesteps that. He gets out of the way. And now we start to close the net. Rook f6. What's the idea? The idea is to move this rook up here, protected by this bishop, checkmate. And you're going to go, huh? There's a rook in the way. Yeah, keep an eye on the pattern. Black can't do much other than push pawns, and now we just play rook h7. You guys understand the pattern? Do you see the net? This checkmate is pretty much unstoppable. The machine gave me a check. I took with my king. They pushed a pawn. I guess they're trying to make a queen, but I don't think they're going to make it. What's that? Checkmate. I hope you learned something. When you play your games and you have a big material advantage, always remember what you're learning in these videos. Step 1, make sure the other side can't do something to you. Step 2, get every piece into the game, constantly improving the pieces until you see a pattern. If it's sort of an endgame position and you have a lot of material, activate your king. Okay? All right, Grandmasters, I'll see you next week. Do the workouts on Chess Kid.